Hello, I'm Bill Hill, the CISO for the MITRE Corporation, and with me is Dr. Stan Barr, our capability area lead for cyber denial, deception, and adversary engagement, and our favorite mad scientist. We're here to introduce you to a recently published resource called MITRE Shield and discuss what it means to learn from your adversaries using engagement. For those of you who don't know us, MITRE's public-private partnerships and federally funded R&D centers work to tackle challenges to the safety, security, and well-being of our nation. As part of our public interest mission, we work to bring communities together to develop more effective cybersecurity. With MITRE Shield, we've introduced some things that we think are kind of game-changing and groundbreaking, but they're not just ideas. As Stan and I are going to talk about throughout this presentation, they're all grounded in experience. Stan and I have been working together on and off for quite a long time, a number of years in this area. And so we're going to try to bring you both the CISO view and the practitioner view of what the activity behind Shield really means and how you can benefit from it. So if you're ready for that, Stan, are you ready? You want to jump in?
Yeah, no, I'm just excited to be here. It's great to work with Bill. I've gotten to work with Bill for like 26 years now, off and on, and he's one of my favorite mentors, and it's great to be on stage, virtual stage, with him. And I look forward to talking about this subject.
Okay, so here we go.
So I guess I'm going to start the talk off. I'll just give you a little organization about how the talk is going to be run today. We're going to start off with our evolutionary approach, how we got to where we are. Then me and Bill are going to talk about where we are right now with Shield. And then finally, we're going to close out with where we're going with Shield 2.0. Shield builds on a lot of work from MITRE. Everything at MITRE builds from past work that we have done. We've done a lot of work in the areas of deception, of adversary engagement, and understanding malware and bad guys. So there are some things up here you'll see. Some of our authors, some of our MITRE brethren and sisters have put together a book called Cyber Denial, Deception, and Counter Deception. Phenomenal book. You should go out and pick it up. We have some work that you can come to our website and see about the idea of the cyberspace advantage, letting them in. So this is a white paper on the use of deception. And I'm sure everyone in the audience has heard of CVE. And so, MITRE puts a lot of this stuff together, and it's how we sort of build new work, right? We figure out what we learn from all these other things, and we adapt them, and we bring it all along. So Shield is yet another piece of interlocking puzzle pieces of MITRE's work. So, I'll just start out with the bottom line. MITRE Shield, it maps to attack, right? Shaka shocks where MITRE connects to a lot of other things that we do. And the idea, if you look at both MITRE ATT&CK and MITRE Shield, what you're going to see today is that it comes from a long understanding of our adversaries. So I started MITRE's cyber deception operations program in 2008, and we were really interested in learning about our adversaries, right? And we wanted to have this idea of how do we map the adversaries' TTPs to engage with them. And as we've gone, we've built that up, right? So we want to build defender TTPs that can work for them and learn from the attacks that they observe. We want to show what opportunities an adversary presents to you and how you can use their adversarial TTPs to your advantage. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the very useful defender TTPs and how you can actually bring them to bear in your operations. And we really believe that Shield as a framework and as a thought model can help you build capabilities that you can say, here's what I'm seeing in attack. Here's what this sort of approach of our adversaries are. Now, how do I, as a defender, sort of make advantages against my adversary? Bill, did you have anything you wanted to add about that?
No, keep rolling. You're saying everything.
Okay. So, when we set the stage for Shield, there is a couple things that we're really looking to do, right? So I'm going to lay out, where we're going with Shield, why is Shield important? And let's start with looking and trying to lay out somewhat of an XY axis, right? And where we want to wind up is not relying on luck, right? So many times defenders are stuck with whatever happens. We want to move the defender from luck to a proactive skill where they can actually accomplish things that are useful for their mission for defense. And at the same time, with that skill, we want to develop knowledge about the APT. And so we've sort of laid this out in sort of a logical progression of how technologies can help you. So, of course, there's what everyone needs to be doing. There's a bunch of necessity things that come along with this, is logging and IDS and all the rest of the stuff that you're told about. And those are really great for forensic analysis later on of what happened, right? But the problem is all you learn about is what has happened. And hopefully you get it in your log. So, moving up the chain of sort of building information advantage and skill advantage is simple honeypots, right? Even today, there is some value in standing up a honeypot and seeing what happens. Who touches that, right? Who touches the honeypot? What do they try and interact with it? You start learning about where the adversary is coming from. You can start to learn about how they interact with objects on your network. So moving up and looking at today's active deception, and when we talk about active deception, we're talking about sophisticated systems that have lures and syncs and credentials and real information that confirms the adversary that he's on the right place, and fake information that throws him off, right? And this idea of actively deceiving your adversary to confuse him, to adjust a sort of ambiguity knob where sometimes we want the adversary to think he's not being observed. And so we have a deception system with all sorts of stuff analyzing and monitoring, and he's allowed to do anything. And sometimes we might turn the ambiguity knob all up and say, here's a million shares with a whole bunch of users, and you can't figure out what is real. And and that idea of seeing how the adversary interacts with that environment is really exciting and can really teach you a lot, because your adversary has to engage. But what we are trying to focus on in Shield is sort of at this point, which is adversary engagement. And it is the intentional interaction with threats. And, there are a lot of ways to do that. Sometimes you may create a synthetic environment. And we'll talk about that later on, about the value proposition of creating a synthetic environment and using sort of deceptive technologies to get your adversary to operate. And I will say that adversary engagement is also is not pulling the plug the very moment you find that threat on your network, right? And so adversary engagement is about the safe operation and figuring out what you need to do to make sure that you can learn what's going on before you pull the plug, to make sure you have a good understanding of it. And there's a lot there, and it can be dangerous. And you have to have a lot of things in place to make sure you do it right. But man, just pulling the plug may be pulling the only thread that you will have to find more about your adversary. Moving a little farther up on that and where you might want to go, there's a lot of definitions of adversary engagement, active deception, active defense. And I sort of use the DoD lingo for this, right? Which is active defense is limited offensive activities. That's out of scope for Shield. And certainly, lastly, out of scope for Shield is the idea of hackback, where we don't want to be focused there. We want to focus Shield on the point of right here where we're engaging with our adversary and we're interacting with them. And our goal with interacting with them is to learn about their weaknesses, to learn about how they operate, to be able to expose what's going on. And hopefully by understanding it and better being prepared for it, we can reduce the threat posed by these adversaries. It's not about going toe to toe with them. It's about reducing adversary aggression by understanding their weaknesses and using that weaknesses against them to sort of maybe hopefully make them go away. And so that's what I'll say about where we're, how we're setting the stage for SHIELD. Bill, did you want to, anything you want to chime in on here?
No, I think the only thing I might mention is that, the honeypots is a form of deception. But as typically done, it's sort of all comers, right? Those are often exposed to anybody. So one of the big advantages of moving up the scale also is that you're being more selective about who you're engaging. It's either because as Stan talked about, something that's already happening on your network. It's well, someone has chosen you and they've gotten that far, or as you'll see later, we talk about. In some cases, you can choose sort of the adversary you want to study and sort of the time and place of that. So it's a little different. It's taking honeypots to a much more selective place. So
I'm going to let you take this slide, Bill.
Yeah. So we thought, we talk a lot about adversary engagement. Everybody has a lot of different sort of. These terms aren't really solidly all agreed to in industry, so we thought, okay, let's set the stage a little bit. What are we talking about, sort of at a hands-on level, right? So all of us, all of us CISOs, all of us corporate defenders, find ourselves with malware, right? Your detonation systems, your filters, whatever, can restrict these things for you. Hopefully, you're blocking them. But now here, in some cases, here you have a piece of this on your hands. The first thing that everybody can do is take a look at it. You can reverse engineer it, right? And there are things you can learn from that. It's getting to be, there's less and less you can learn from that every day because our adversaries know that we do this. And so they try to defeat reverse engineering in a number of ways. So then when you move on from that, you can say, well, what's the next thing you can do? Well, it's run it, right? It's go beyond the sort of the static analysis or the isolated analysis. You could certainly run it in a glass jar, and it probably won't do anything because it cannot talk to its command and control network. It understands that this is one of the ways you study malware is you run it on an isolated system. So what we're talking about really is running it in a pseudo-realistic system. So you take that malware, let's say you have a deception network, that could be either simple or it could be complicated. And in fact, sometimes it can be surprisingly simple, but it probably does need to be connected to the internet. And so what typically happens is you run these things and the first thing they do is phone home, right? So they need command and control. They're going to make themselves known to their owner, and thus begins this sort of the second, third, and onward stages of the exploitation, which is the adversary goes hands-on. Sometimes that might be automated for a little while, but for the kind of studies we do, we're eventually ending up with there's an operator at the other end running this thing in your network, and because you own this whole thing. With one more click on the slide, you're able to see every bit of this from the moment the thing starts executing through the command and control. And since you own that environment and you've planned for this, you can collect as much as you want. So you can collect off the target system, you can collect off the network as it goes by, the networking gear. And so in some cases, you can have fairly elaborate collection systems. And you can use these to both watch it in real time and also later, when the engagement's over, these are rich areas for study. Sometimes it's hard to make complete sense of what's going on in the moment. And then you go back and you can really sort of dissect this over time at your leisure. So this sort of, gives you an idea of the simplest thing. And like I said, this can be surprisingly simple. This could be, what I would call a coffee house operation. And in fact, we began this way, right? One computer and a Wi-Fi, and you potentially have a deception environment, as Stan could tell you.
Yeah. So I mean, like it absolutely agree. And we did start a lot of our operations trying to make them look really simple in the beginning. And we learned a lot from those simple engagements. And we have increased our complexity with that. And we now have small office, home office type setups, medium-sized setups, virtual and physical and cloud assets that we put together to sort of make this look more and more like our network.
So, and then of course you can increase your sophistication, as Stan mentioned, but I think we've sort of come away, so thinking about this as sort of the the cartoon for adversary engagement. But it's more like an iceberg, right? There's a lot there below the waterline, and so we've tried to do some sense making, as we've learned a lot about this, and I think we came away from at least for this session with three kind of big ideas about this. Number one, it's easier to get started than you think. A lot of people, when we first started talking to them about doing deception, think, oh my gosh, well, how would I replicate my whole enterprise and an Active Directory and a email server and a this and a that. Our experience says you can have robust, meaningful interactions where you learn a lot about your adversary with environments that are far simpler than that. So this is easier to get started on than most people think. And so that's sort of number one. Stan, I don't know if you want to jump in on that or.
No, I think you've covered that one really well.
Right. So then a second thing we'll tell you, and Stan knows this one all too well, is it's also easier to mess this up than you think. We have learned a lot of lessons, and I think that that's not a reason not to do this, but it is a reason to think about it. We've hit some landmines along the way, and so I think one of the things that we're hoping for is, as people consider getting into this space. And you'll see the commercial at the end. We're hoping for, potentially a community of people that are doing this to work with each other and share those war stories. Not that we have any war stories.
We do. We don't definitely. We've never made a mistake. I'll talk. I can remember this one operation where we had this USB stick, and I told the kid that was setting up the rig to operate, to take the malware, put the malware on a USB stick, put the stick in the computer, copy the malware to the desktop, and then run the malware, right? And he did exactly what I said and nothing I didn't say. And what I should have said before he ran the malware was remove the USB stick from the computer, right? And so a classic thing of when you're building these operations is thinking about, every step that you have to do and what those tells are and what will the adversary do to your computer when he gets running and he does a directory and he sees his malware on a USB stick called malware.exe. So that didn't work out so great in that operation. Right,
because it's end of story, right? Adversaries, if they figure out they're in a deception environment or they're being observed, that's the end of the engagement. That's the end of the useful engagement. And I think we got a freshly formatted drive out of the operation because I don't think he liked the idea very much, did he?
He wasn't impressed.
So that's the second piece, and the third big sort of takeaway from all of this sort of combines the other two, which is that you want to be strategic. This, unlike a lot of other things, this is spy, counter spy, move, counter move. This is a chess game, not a checkers game, and so it really does pay to think about what are your objectives. In Shield version 1. We talked a lot about mechanics, I would say, and we did some talking about objectives. But I think that's a growth area for us. to talk about sort of strategies and what are the potential objectives and then what are your plans to meet those. And I think, we have a lot of our operating principles come out of both not only our objectives of what we want to happen, but what we don't want to happen, right? Stan lives by those every day.
Yeah, no, I like, for instance, when people talk about running operations, they say, hey, use your gold image, right? Use the image so that the adversary has a good belief that this is your network by using a gold image. Well, the problem with using a gold image is sometimes you may have files on your gold image that reveal something about you. And that can be dangerous. You don't want your adversary to get to learn from you. You want to learn from him.
Right. Yep. So I can tell you as a CISO, we don't use our gold image, right? We are not trying to train our adversary so that one day they'll figure out how to defeat all of this. Far from it. We intentionally are using a sort of a different system. So I think we should move on. So the last piece of this that I think in terms of motivation, before we sort of dig into Shield a little bit, is to think about, well, what do you get for doing all this? We talk about, what can you learn? So we've got this little a series of graphs just to show you. These come from a set of actual operations that we have run at MITRE, and so we began to try to quantify, to explore this option of what is the ROI. So imagine that you get pieces of knowledge, and in this graph, they can be different things, but you get pieces of knowledge that are useful to a defender. So that could be a hash of a file that's bad, or an IP address that's bad, and let's just call them, items of intelligence. So here's a list. If we were not to do deception operations, if we did static analysis and so forth, we get a couple of those per case, per piece of malware, whatever. Look at what happens as we start to add adversary engagement to the mix. So the first thing that happens is indicators. These are more in terms of network addresses and so forth. These are all things that I can put into my defenses. These are things that we can add to filter out the bad guy or go look for them. One of the CISO's biggest questions is, how do you know they're not already here? It's like, well, every one of those things that is a sign of the adversary is something that we can go look for in our logs and our files to find. So we get those additional indicators. You can start seeing that the scale on this chart is changing because of all the additional information we're getting. So we get more indicators, we get more files. When you deal only with the malware that's sent to you, what you're missing is the second stage, the third stage, the fourth stage, all the tools that the adversary brings. And every one of those, if you ever find them in your enterprise, is a sign of something bad. And so one of the things we like to think about is we will not necessarily always catch the first sign of an adversary being there. But if those are the only signs we have, what does that tell you? So the more signs that we can have of later periods in their life cycle, the better off we are. And the more resilient we are to them changing their first stage attack. So more indicators, more files, more signatures. And you see now we're dwarfing what we originally knew. In each one of these operations, what we originally knew looks like almost nothing compared to what we learned from the engagement itself. So I think that tells a really great story. If you're a hands-on guy and you want to show your CISO something, this can get your attention.
So yeah, I think so. Hopefully everyone got a chance to screenshot that last one. You'll get them in the slides when those are printed out. I don't know exactly how that's being done this year. So when we talk about what Shield is, and I know we still haven't showed you Shield. We're waiting for the big reveal here. It's really about creating a framework that allows defenders to safely engage, right? And we want to enable CISOs, three fundamental to be able to answer three fundamental questions, right? I think these are important questions. How do you go about finding internal and remote threats? And I think that's something important that we're all interested in doing. We want to understand the threats that we observe. We want to know what's happening, right? As we know that, dwell time is in the days, sometimes into the months. So when you see something going on, you need to think this may have been going on for a while. How do I understand it better before I shift the fight in our favor, right? Because that is ultimately what this is all about, is being able to find things, understand it, and then use what we have learned to shift the fight in our favor. And that's really what we want to do. So I'm going to go through a little pretty quickly here, how we sort of look at what we're doing. So Shield's attack mapping is, how do we apply one of those goals of find and understand and affect? How do we map that to a specific tactic and a technique? One for what we see the adversary do, and what is the tactic and techniques that we can use against them. So the way we look at this is like, for example, so if you go to the Shield website and you look at our mappings, right? So on the left-hand side, you see an attack technique. And so this maps to a very specific attack technique in the matrix. And the adversary, in this case, wants to gather victim identity information. So they're looking to figure out what's going on the victim. So in Shield, we then look at that and we call that an opportunity space. And there's an opportunity. When he does this, there's an opportunity for you to influence your adversary's future actions. And you ask, how is that? So, one use case is that a defender can deploy decoy user accounts to make that system look more realistic. So when he uses that tactic, when he uses an attack technique to gather identity information, you give him as much as you want. And so what we have here is this idea of attack technique, the opportunity that presents you, how you go about using it, and then we map that into a adversary engagement technique there. And so that's how we are looking at this. I'm going to sit down here, and for the next 2 hours, we're going to go through every single block in this. It's going to be exciting. Hang on to your seats. No, when we look at Shield, we're trying to map, and we have a set of our own columns here: channel, collect, contain, detect, disrupt, facilitate, legitimize, and test. And I'm not going to go through all of them, right? Because otherwise we'd be here forever. But let's go back to the very simple example that Bill showed in the beginning of the coffee shop op, right? So the first thing that we looked at there was we looked at detection. And so if you go to our detect column here, partially way down through there, through the list is detonate malware. Because when you detonate a piece of malware, you learn what happens when it starts out. What registry keys does it look for? What DNS domains, right? So you are starting to figure out how you can go about doing a detection, right? And so then we started looking at, what do we do? What other columns, right? So we can create, we can go to the legitimize column, and we can say we can create a decoy network. We can put decoy information, decoy assets out there. And when an adversary sees that, they go, oh, this is real. This is how this looks real to me, and I'm willing to operate here, right? And then you look at the test column. So what can we drag from the test column? There's this idea of decoy content. What do you put on this machine that on the desktop, when he gets a snapshot of that, or on the file system, what does he see? What does he go after? Does he go after secret product X, or does he go after financial information, right? And so you can start maybe picking apart what your adversary's interests are, and you can test him and you can understand him better, right? And then, as Bill talked about earlier, one of the things that we do at the end of our operations is we build dissectors and protocol decoders. And that allows us for our during our operations, because malware or APTs often reuse the same tools. Next time we see it, we can decode the traffic much faster. Second, it can also help your M&R operations when you're trying to figure out something bad that happens and you're able to decrypt that traffic and decode that traffic. Man, is that a powerful, that's a powerful concept and use case. And so that's in our collection, right? You collect your packet, you build your decoders, and then presto magic, you can understand things a lot better. So, we are moving. We are excited about Shield. We have been out there. Shield is on. We see people talking about it on LinkedIn. We get a lot of requests in the Shield mailbox. And we are really excited about Shield V2. We're working on Shield V2. We will have Shield 2 beta out soon for people to, and maybe even before this goes live. But we are going to take that feedback that we've gotten, and we are really going to up the game on enabling adversary engagement, right? So we're going to make it a little more clear on how to support those 3 use cases: find, understand, and affect. We're reorganizing it a little bit to make sure that we have a singular focus on the defender's point of view, and we're trying to create a little cleaner of a taxonomy. But most important, what we're trying to do is incorporate feedback from the community. And if you are interested in adversary engagement, if you want to understand how to use deception in your enterprise, if you have ideas that you don't see us working on, we want to get some feedback from you. So some of the things that we're going to focus on and crispen up is the idea of how we're doing collection and detection. We're really going to be focusing in the next version of Shield on planning and analyzing. How do you make sure that you set up a way to plan? How do you actually have a plan of attack? And how do you look at your operation and analyze the data? That's going to be a foundational piece. And then we're going to sort of crispen up this idea of prevent, direct, and disrupt. And so these are the columns that you'll see in Shield V2. And we are excited to roll this out in the very near future. And please, as you look at Shield, as you guys hear us today, I hope you guys are typing questions into the chat box, and we want to engage with you. We want to get the feedback. We want to make adversary engagement something that is accessible to every organization who wants to be involved, to make it harder for our adversaries. We need to stop giving them a free pass. Bill, did you want to add anything here?
No, just other than to give a commercial for the follow-on Q&A. So if we should have mentioned you can be typing your questions in early, but if for some reason we're out of time with questions here, there's going to be a follow-on session with Q&A.
So we were asked to how people can apply Shield. And so, what should you guys do next week? The first thing you should do when you get back from RSA and you're done with all this, don't look through your email box, because that's the worst thing you can do. The first thing is review the Shield framework, right? Look at it, see what's going on, determine if adversary engagement is right for you. And if you think it's right for you, if you think this is the worst idea, send it to the Shield mailbox. I'm excited. I will read this stuff. I want to hear what people are really thinking, right? Tell us what you think about Shield. Tell us what you need from it. What is the future that we can bring to you? And tell us if adversary engagement is right for you. Tell us if you want to be a part of a coalition of the willing to try these things out. We're looking for partners. MITRE is an open place where we try and engage with the whole community. What I'd like to see is people within 3 months develop a plan to run malware safely. I can't strenuously enough say that. If you don't know what safely means, right? If you go like, I don't know, then it's not safe, right? You should be able to say, heck yeah, this is safe. And if you're going to run malware, make sure it's isolated, try something out, use a junk computer, right? It's something that you want to be able to dump in a dumpster when you're done with it and not have to worry that it's going to wind up being someone's lifeline in the future, right? Throw that thing away when you're done. And then within 6 months, I really want you to run a piece of malware. Share what you learn. Share it with me. Send it to the Shield mailbox. Send me a PDF. Send me a Word document with macros enabled. I'll open it. I promise. I'll open it on my MITRE machine. No, don't do that. Bill is terrified now. No, seriously. Run a piece of malware if you're so inclined. You will learn something about it. Your guys will be excited about the chance to engage with an adversary and learn about some of these things. And seriously, share that stuff out and share it with your organizations and your local ISAC and all the rest of it. And I think you will find that it's exciting and you will learn something. And Bill, do you have any final words other than don't send me?
Do not send us malware. We are not asking for that. But no, I think you hit it. It's it is approachable. We are approachable, and we wish you luck.
Yeah, and go RSA.